and gentlemen. This is Jim from Massachusetts MUFON on the American Road Warrior channel. And with me today, I have the honor and privilege to speak with Dr. Avi Loeb at Harvard University. He's heading up the Galileo project. Thank you so much for the honor of joining us. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's my honor.
Thank you. Dr. Loeb, one thing I was wondering was with the Galileo projects, you're tracking the trajectory or paths of UAPs. And so the difference is instead of electromagnetic signals with SETI, you're actually going after physical objects. I was curious if you could mention a couple of UAPs just as an example.
Right. Well, I started being interested in the subject because the astronomers discovered the first objects from outside the solar system over the past decade. So that's a new development. And back in October 2017, the first one was reported. It was found by a telescope in Hawaii. It was roughly the size of a football field, 100 meters. And at first, of course, everyone assumed it's just like the rocks in the solar system, either an asteroid or a comet that we are familiar with. But then the object exhibited the qualities that are very different than the rocks that we know about. It was very extreme in its shape. The amount of sunlight that was reflected from it changed by a factor of 10 as it was tumbling every 8 hours. And that meant the 90% confidence that it was most likely flat. Pancake-like, and moreover, it was pushed away from the sun by some mysterious force without showing any cometary evaporation. So it was not a comet, because a comet is identified by the tail, the coma behind it. As of now, the experts still claim that it is a natural object, but maybe it is a dark comet, which reminds me of Hans Christian Andersen's tale that, you know, I'm the kid saying, well, the emperor has no clothes. In this case, the emperor is this object and the clothes are the cometary tail. And the adults in the room around me claim, oh, no, there is a tail. There is the emperor has clothes, but you just can't see them. So they call it a dark comet, where the cometary tail is invisible. It remains a mystery. The community talks about rocks of a type that we've never seen before, like a hydrogen iceberg, a nitrogen iceberg, a dust bunny. All of these suggestions have issues, have problems. And we have to find another object like it to figure it out. And this year, there will be a new observatory in Chile called the Rubin Observatory. That will start operations in August, and will use a 3.2 gigapixel camera to look at the southern sky every 4 days. And we hope to find many more family members of Oumuamua. And obviously now we will collect much more data using also the Webb telescope that we have at our disposal. This was, if you talk about a UAP, an unidentified object, this was the first one that opened my entry into this subject. But together with my student, we discovered another object that was actually spotted back in 2014, so almost 4 years earlier. And it was a meteor, 0.5 meter in size, an object that collided with Earth and exploded, but only in the lower atmosphere. And it showed material strength tougher than all other meteors that were cataloged by NASA, hundreds of them.
Oh, was that M1?
Yeah, IM1. We gave it the name IM1 for Interstellar Meteor 1. It's the first one that had a speed well above the escape speed from the solar system, which meant that it cannot be bound by gravity to the sun. It came from outside the solar system based on US government satellite data. And of course, my colleagues try to deny that. They say they don't believe the US government, even though the US Space Command, I asked them to look back at the data. I reached out to them through the White House, and it took them 3 years. They confirmed at the 99.999% that this object is interstellar. But even after their letter to NASA confirming it, still the experts write that they don't believe the data. It's not interstellar.
Loeb, is this part of what you were writing in one of your essays about some scientists being against science?
Yes, I think this is anti-science because what I decided to do once the US Space Command confirmed the interstellar identity of this object, I decided to lead an expedition to the Pacific Ocean to look for the materials left from the wreckage of this meteor. And um, we went there. It was the cost was $1.5 million. There will be a Netflix documentary by the end of this year showing the expedition and other things. And we brought some materials that we analyzed in the laboratory. It took us a year to use the best equipment in the world in the laboratory of my colleague at Harvard, the Stein Jacobson. And nevertheless, the experts on comets and the asteroids wrote papers saying, you went to the wrong place. This was not a meteor. This was a truck. We don't believe the US government. What you found is coal ash. Just trying to raise dust and claim that they don't see anything. And they didn't
You
have
know
any
why that
access.
is, Dr. Loeb?
So what is it? Sorry.
Do you understand, or do you have any ideas why it is that they want to debunk something like that?
Oh, yeah, it's very simple. The strongest force in academia is jealousy. So the fact that I get a lot of public attention, there were lots of coverage of the work that I'm doing, and in recent interviews, I mean, I had about 4,000 interviews over the past 4 or 5 years, but in the most recent ones, the reporters tell me that I'm the most well-known scientist in the world. And of course, people in academia have a problem with that because of jealousy. And I'm just following the scientific method. My approach is, this is a subject that the public cares about. There are anomalies. And the way that science works is that you try to collect as much evidence as possible. I would love to have huge amount of data so that the conclusions will be beyond any reasonable doubt. But my colleagues not only resist the existing data, they say they don't believe it, but they also try to push back and suppress the study. They don't want me to go to the Pacific Ocean. They don't want me to get funded. And that is really anti-science because they don't want to see the evidence. And it reminds me of what the Vatican did when Copernicus and Galileo argued that perhaps the Earth is at the center of the solar system. They tried to hide the data, block the publication of the book of Copernicus, which I have behind me because I was invited to celebrate 450 years to the birth of Nicolaus Copernicus in Torun, Poland, by the Polish government just a year ago, and they gave me his book. So, this is human nature, and it just shows the pettiness, how inappropriate is the sociology of science right now. You have a lot of people speculating on extra dimensions for 50 years, in the context of string theory. You have people that talk about things that were never substantiated, and nobody has a problem with that because it doesn't get a lot of attention from the public or the press. But I'm trying to collect evidence, collect data on a subject that is of interest to the public, and because of the interest, I'm being attacked. So this is inappropriate, it's unfortunate, but it doesn't deter me. I'm leading the Galileo project. In addition to this expedition, we're building observatories that look for unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP. And one is operating already for a year. We have about 1 million objects that we monitored in Massachusetts at Harvard University, in the infrared, optical, radio, and audio. And we are using machine learning software to figure out if there is anything that is not familiar, anything other
Dr.
than...
Loeb, may I ask you, please, regarding the infrared, there seems to be a lot of UAPs on the coast and in general around nuclear facilities. Do you feel that for some reason these UAPs are purposely in infrared because they don't want to be detected, or it has nothing to do with that?
No, My guess is, well, UAPs in general are a mixed bag. It's a significant fraction of them are probably mundane, drones, balloons, satellites, airplanes, that some people, when they see them, they cannot figure out their identity and they call them UAPs. That's obviously the case in many cases. But the concentration around the military sites, around nuclear reactors, at this point, could be just because there are cameras there that are monitoring these facilities that are of strategic importance. And in fact, I was speaking with the director of AERO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office in the Pentagon, just last month. And as far as they are concerned, they are looking back at reports, but they do see a small fraction, less than a few percent of the reports as being unexplained, that they cannot figure it out. And they really want the scientific approach to be applied the way we do with the Galileo project. But the one thing they don't know, because their cameras or their equipment is located in military facilities, they don't know what happens elsewhere. And the fact that you hear a lot of reports about, nuclear reactors or military facilities, simply because people are monitoring the sky over there to make sure that there is no national security risk there. And what Aero doesn't know, and what I don't know at the moment, is how how general, universal are these UAPs? In other words, we need to go to other sites that have nothing to do with national security and see whether the same type of events occur there. And at the moment, we just don't have enough data on that. Now, the Galileo project, in addition to the observatory at Harvard, we just went last week to assemble an observatory in Pennsylvania. That is funded by the Richard King Mellon Foundation. I received funding for it, and we are now starting to get data from Pennsylvania in addition to Massachusetts. And then by the end of the summer 2025, we will have hopefully another observatory in Nevada. And the new observatories will open up for us a new frontier, because not only will they have other geographic locations, so we can see, maybe Boston is very boring, there is nothing there. But we will have 3 locations, so we should get a few million objects every year. But more importantly, we'll have in each of these observatories, we'll have 3 units that can do triangulation. So if they are separated from each other, if you have cameras that are separated by a few miles from each other, then you can do triangulation. You can figure out the distance to an object based on observations of the same objects from different directions. So it's just like our eyes can assess distance because we have 2 eyes. That was exactly the purpose of having 2 eyes, to be able to assess the distance of a threat. So animals with 2 eyes survived much better than animals with 1 eye. So we would have multiple units, 3 units hopefully, for each of these observatories. And once we have distance, that will resolve a lot of ambiguity, because you can see an object moving across the sky very fast, but if it's close to you, the actual speed is not high. If it's a bug that moves close to the camera, it would look as if it's moving very fast, but in fact, it's just because it's close that you think it's moving fast. So you're just seeing the angular motion. So the idea is, with distances, we should be able to improve our ability to find even 1 out of a million objects that has an unusual speed and unusual flight characteristics, unusual acceleration. So this is my hope, that after the summer, we'll have potentially some really intriguing objects that we find. And I should also mention that on May 1st, just in 2 weeks from now, there will be a briefing of the task force on federal secrets, the same task force led by Representative Luna, that was looking into the JFK assassination, is also looking into UAP, and I'm there to represent the scientific inquiry into UAPs, and this will be a 2-hour long session with members of Congress, open to the public, open to the media, and I very much hope to elevate the discussion and make the case that the scientific research into UAPs should be funded.
Wonderful. So to the average person out there, sort of the layman, they're not amazed. Personally, I'm amazed when I was inspired by Luis Elizondo when he had his show approximately 8 years ago, and with all the experts on there, I was like, oh my God, this stuff is real. And yeah, and so for me, it's an amazing time of change, and folks like him, and of course you, Dr. Loeb, going against the grain helps promote change. I'm just curious. Maybe you could tell the folks out there that aren't really familiar with UAPs what you see the benefits are to humanity as disclosure happens.
Well, so this event in Washington, D.C. Will discuss the three aspects of UAP research. The first one is scientific. If we find a technological artifact from another civilization outside the solar system, it will be the most important discovery that humanity ever made. Just to give you an example, the astronomy community every 10 years decides about its priorities. And this decade, it's called the Decadal Survey, that was funded by the National Academy of Sciences, concluded that their first priority is to build the next big telescope in space called the Habitable World Observatory by the middle of the 2040s. So they're planning 20 years ahead. And the goal is to invest more than $10 billion in an observatory in space that would look at maybe 25 stars, search for habitable planets near them, and look for biomarkers. These are molecules like oxygen, methane, CO2, water, in the atmospheres of these planets. And if we find those molecules, maybe they tell us that there is primitive life on those planets. That's the main goal of the astronomy community for the next 20 years, to find evidence for microbes. And I say, microbes are very boring. I'm pretty confident that anywhere you have liquid water for billions of years, you will have microbes. I mean, I would be really surprised if that doesn't happen, because it happened on Earth as soon as the Earth cooled, and probably happened on Mars even before the Earth. So I think that we should hedge our bets, because it's much easier to detect a technological gadget if it exists, if we have space trash around it, around us, around the Earth. Traditionally, SETI was focused on looking for radio signals, but this is just like waiting for a phone call at home. Nobody may call you when you're listening or waiting, but technological space trash is more similar to archaeology. You don't need those civilizations to be around when you are around. You just find the relics that they left behind. We sent a lot of space trash, and maybe there is trash from other civilizations in space. It's bound to the Milky Way galaxy by gravity, just like Voyager would be in a billion years. And so we can look for that. And so that's the rationale. And we can also look for functional devices. So my point is, why isn't the astronomy community deciding to allocate? You might say, okay, it's not the highest priority, but maybe 10% of the budget. So $1 billion, $1 billion towards the search for artifacts near Earth. Right now, it didn't recommend anything. NASA or NSF do not fund the search for technological artifacts near Earth. Zero compared to more than $10 billion for the next 20 years. That is not a wise strategy. And, because suppose the Galileo project finds something, they will have to redefine what the goal is, because looking for microbes when you find that there are intelligent beings would look like, a very peripheral objective, which is right now the focus of the entire astronomy community, the mainstream, and NASA for the next 20 years in more than $10 billion. So I'm saying, let's hedge our bets. Let's put even $1 billion for a space telescope that would look around the Earth. There are of order a million objects like IM-1, this meteor that collided with Earth, right now between the Earth and the Sun. And the Sun is like a lamppost. It illuminates all the objects. So you need a dedicated telescope to look through the rocks. I have no doubt that it's a mixed bag, that lots of rocks from outside the solar system, but among them, there might be technological space trash. We are not looking. We're not checking because we want to look very far away for, some, I would say, tentative evidence of microbes.
And
Tentative
that's
evidence.
consistent, Dr. Loeb, that's very consistent with what you were saying about you're going against the grain, looking at things that are closer and have a lot of potential, but you have a lot of other researchers that want to keep going with what they have on their agenda. That's very consistent.
But one thing I wanted to emphasize, what I'm a scientist, I've been at Harvard for 32 years, and I've been doing science for 40 years. This is supposed to be part of this scientific agenda, because if we are looking for microbes, we should also look for intelligence. What Lou Elizondo is talking about is very different. He is not a scientist. He is not engaged in any scientific research. He never studied science in a way that allows him to address this question as a researcher. But he was a government employee, and he believes the government has knowledge of things that we should all know about related to the topic that we are discussing. So that is like someone that witnessed some discussion, some information, and therefore wants it to be disclosed. You have to understand this is very different, okay? I don't know if the US government has information. If it does, I would love them to share it with me, a scientist, so that I can help them figure it out. Because it's not of national security relevance, it's information about the universe. It's like knowing about the Big Bang or knowing that the Earth is not at the center of the solar system. This should be shared. This information should be shared by all humans. Okay, if they cannot figure out what they have in their hands, I'll be glad to help them. But I haven't seen that. Lou Elizondo claims they have that. Other people testified, like David Grush, they have that. Okay, well, we'll see. I mean, I hope that by visiting Washington, I will learn some more details about that. But I was not exposed to that information. I don't know if it's reliable. I don't know if the government has any materials. But you have to understand, this is very different. Going to someone who may have information and pressing that someone to release the information is a very different endeavor than looking at the sky. The sky is not classified. I don't need to ask permission from anyone to look at the sky. Astronomers have been doing that. So it's very different. You cannot lump the two things together. Lou Elizondo and scientists they're not doing the same thing. Lou is trying to press the government to disclose what it already knows. I am trying to find out what is out there. Okay. Now, if the government knows something, I would love to know it. But practicing science is very different than pressuring politicians.
Is this part of the agenda at the forum coming up on May 1st?
My goal is to argue for more scientific inquiry. So science requires funding. For example, we want to go again on an expedition to the Pacific Ocean to use a robot that we will place on the ocean floor and find bigger pieces of the meteor. This will cost $6.5 million. We have the ship, we have the robot, we have the team of researchers that are eager to go there. And we could go there in August this year, 2025. The only problem is we don't have the funding. So if we had the funding, we would do it. But, in order to do research, you need funding.
Would you agree, Dr. Loeb, that compared to all these other endeavors out there for billions of dollars, that although 6 million is a chunk of change that I wouldn't have, it's a drop in the bucket for those that have money available for funding?
Definitely. And I really hope that, just as with the other research of Galileo project, that we will get a donor that comes forward and provides the funding. And of course, the donor will have privileges. The donor can join us on the expedition, or we will report directly about what we find to the donor. So the donor will know firsthand what is happening. We will have a video feed from the ocean floor when we collect the materials, for example.
So, Dr. Loeb, I'm really honored and I'm excited. This has been one of the thrills of my life to speak with you. And on behalf of Massachusetts MUFON and the American Road Warrior Channel, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure. And I hope within the coming year or two, we will know much more than we currently know.
Okay, great. All right. Bye-bye.